All right. Think everything's good to go. So welcome everyone. Of course. All right, hold up. We have a little bit of a technical issue. Zoom decided to crash on me. So let's get this thing situated. Stand by for just a minute for us while we fix these technical issues here. What the crap? Seriously? Okay. Okay. So Zoom decided to say absolutely no, I'm not letting this happen, and just X'd me out. So again, welcome to the Mystic Circle podcast. I am your host for tonight, the Gothic Mystic. Joining us tonight is Adam Starseed Bay and Scion. So how are y'all doing tonight?
Yo, doing good.
We're doing good.
Good. Alright, so assuming everything continues to go as expected, we're talking tonight kind of just on the idea of the multi-dimensions, how God is a multi-dimensional being, how we interact with the multi-dimensions on a regular basis, and of course all the divine beings and just everything that's around us that we are not necessarily aware of. So Adam, since you kind of brought up the idea, I'd say why don't you start us off?
Oh boy, where to begin? I'd say basically, it comes down to when we have a spiritual journey, right? We always have some kind of foundation, right? I was
Hmm.
born and raised in a Christian home, so I was taught about the Bible and what it means to have a one God or a creator that we talk to, and then we have like our best friend, right, which would be Christ, to help guide us through and having conversations with God. And as I grew up, the concept of it always kind of threw me off because I always felt like God was so far away, but Christ was always just kind of there,
Hmm.
right? So it was always kind of like you could have two conversations. Sometimes I would have a conversation with Christ, and sometimes, if you're going through a hard time, you really just kind of just kind of go out there and say, "Hey, I want to hear you, God. I want to know where you are. I want to know where you're at in the dimensions. Why do you feel so far away?" Right? Because in the churches, they always make you feel like heaven and God is so far away from us. So it always feels like there's a sense of abandonment and things like that. So, and the reason why I bring that up is because I think a lot of people still kind of feel that way
Hmm.
if you're in that church realm. Um, so for me personally, in 2010 is when things really shifted and changed. So from what I can remember, from 5 to whatever, my mid 20s, whatever, I had that perception. But in 2010 to now, I really discovered a deeper way of looking at the creator or creators, right? If you look into the Hebrew roots of the word God, you learn that there's a word called Elohim. Elohim means plural,
Hmm.
and it opens up a lot of doorways of like, well, if Hebrew had this word Elohim and it's plural, meaning many, um, what does that mean? Like, um, are we talking to many gods? And then as you read through the Bible,
Hmm.
it seems like each character is talking to a higher power, but on their personal journey.
Yeah.
So Adam and Eve had a personal journey with a God. Moses had a personal journey with a God. Of course, you had Abraham as well. Um, and it always seemed like the Bible kind of tried to make you go, hey, Abraham's God, and so on and so forth, kind of trying to distinguish between those. But then you go into the cultures and you learn that these cultures have the same element of a god. And then like the Vikings, like I never really knew how deep and rich the Viking history was until I watched the Vikings TV series.
Hmm.
And there's a character on there that is Christian based, and he got thrown into the Vikings way of life, kind of forcefully. But the main character that is a Viking really was fascinated about this one God, and about this Savior. And it really fascinated me. It really gave me a deeper perception of like, hey, people have these different elements. And going back to 2010, that's what I was learning because I had to learn about deep meditation. I had to learn about having a stronger foundation with the creator, what that meant, a stronger foundation with Christ, and using meditation as a tool to walk with Christ and have visions um, of how the dimensions work, because I didn't even know what dimensions were until 2010. So learn about the multidimensional ways of things and that there's guardians in each dimension, which is astonishing to me, right? And that's just my personal journey, but I was learning about these each dimensions through these different uh, heavens,
Hmm.
right? There's many multiple heavens, and it's talked about in the Bible. Josh would know a little more about that than me, but there's many different layers in the heavens, and that also brings into the element that there is multidimensional breadcrumbs within the Bible, and it's not just a singular, but it's multidimensional. So it's a personal level, multidimensional level, so on and so forth. So I'll let you guys continue with that.
Um, Sion, why don't you go next? Because I'm still trying to get things going on the back end here since everything crashed on me.
Yeah. Wow. How do we
And you're
talk
real and
about
you're low too.
infinity? Say what?
There we go. That's better.
Okay. Yeah. I there's so many ways to go on this topic, of course, but
Oh yeah.
yeah, I was just thinking, Adam, how you're talking about kind of this mainstream churchianity kind of vibe about God being this distant um character that we have to beg to come down to our level or something, or heaven being this faraway Disney castle in the clouds that we can get to one day. But for me, like some of my very minimal study of some of the sacred texts of Christianity, Yeshua was talking about this thing called the kingdom of heaven. And I really resonate when he talks about how the kingdom of heaven is at hand,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of the deeper stuff with some of the original language with that is like this concept that heaven is at hand. It's closer to you than your hand. It's closer, like you can put your hand in front of your face and feel your breath. Like the kingdom of heaven, the dimension of heaven is closer than the air that we breathe. So that resonates with me a whole lot more in my experience and just who I am, my particular flavor of spirituality. I'm thinking about the divine as this infinite being, infinite dimension that's immediately accessible. So another dimension, but not some dimension way off elsewhere. It's an overlay of the reality of the divine and all, infinitely stacked dimensions
Mm-hmm.
of the divine and divine beings, and all kind of overlaid on the physically tangible one that we perceive with our basic senses. So I don't know. I like looking at it like that.
I was. I remember that I think it was probably around the same time. I think with Adam is whenever I was introduced to it. Introduced to the idea that there's multiple dimensions. Maybe even younger, but it wasn't really until around that same time 2011 2012 2010 some along those lines. I think I can't remember the teacher's name. He has since passed, but he had a very deep teaching on Genesis where he actually showed that there was up to, I think it was either 10 or 12 different dimensions just alone mentioned in Genesis. Now, I said I still need to go back over that stuff, but like as I've grown, I have learned that like he's all around us, but also all these different beings that he has created, that are, some of them are just barely mentioned in the Bible itself, but it kind of gives us the idea of like the family that we have out there and around us. All the different angelic can't really put a different or better word to it, because we know whether you're in a church or whatever, we all call them angels, but the word angel just means messenger. Look it up. It's in the Bible, and you can find it in probably blueletterbible.com. Go there and you can look up angel or angelic or angelos, and the basic message, basic description of that means a messenger of God. So as I've grown, I have realized that okay, we have our guardian angels that protect us regardless of what we do, but there's also all these different beings that God puts in place all around creation in some way, shape, or form that is doing a job for the Father's creation. And for those who have read Enoch, it gives an even a better idea that, you know, God put all these different divine beings in place to do a certain job. And what's his name? Michael Heiser. He I don't want to call it a doctrine. I hate the word doctrine. He came up with a good viewpoint, a world viewpoint that takes a lot of the Old Testament stuff and puts it in with what Jesus was speaking about when it comes to all the gods that are spoken of in the Old Testament. And it shows that whenever Israel and all that stuff happened, he divided all the nations of the world amongst the sons of God. And that means then sons of God, like the divine beings, all the different angels or whatever you want to call them, and not Israel. That doesn't make any sense if it was Israel. So that would mean that all the angelic, the divine forces that we deal with, that Paul was speaking of, the principalities, they were all divine beings that God created to put into certain areas, and many of them had fallen. And so, you know, that's a lot of stuff that we deal with now. But let's also go to I guess you could say the basics of, like, some of the dimensions. People see angels and demons every day. Those are multi-dimensional beings, just like we are. We are multi-dimensional beings. We deal with, even though we don't really notice it, I think we deal with, what, 4 different dimensions at one time? Am I right on that, give or take? I think so. Adam?
Depends on your thing. Like with me, see if I get it right. There's your physical body dimension, your spiritual body dimension, your mental mind dimension, and your emotional body dimension. Those are the 4 basic ones that we deal with on a daily basis. Like, that's just part of our daily lives. Wow. At least that's from my understanding, anyways.
I wasn't even thinking about those at all. I was thinking along the lines of, like, we got, the first dimension, which is flat, then you got the second, and then you got the 3D, and then the 4D, and all that stuff, and then time. So we just added even more for what you said right there.
That's just our being alone, right? You know, but we're also dealing with a matrix world. So that's where yours comes in, of that we got a singular dimension, we got multi dimensions, then we got overlays over overlays over overlays. It just depends on how deep you want to go into that construct. But that is a collective playground that we all play collectively. So there's a singular one that I talked about, the 4 bodies, and then there's a multi-dimensional one that we collectively play in.
I think about too, just like the different spectrum of, you know, we have our physical senses, but then there's you know, different fields, different frequencies of light that we can't always perceive. You know, I'm thinking electromagnetic forces, so maybe that, you know, there's a lot of different ways to look at it, and so at what point, you know, we might start talking about we're sensing something with our spirit. But I feel like that probably has kind of an overlay with, like, our spirit can be described as the way that our body senses invisible electromagnetic, you know, it's kind of all connected. And I think the less we know about our ability to perceive sound and gamma rays or whatever, like, I'm not educated really on all of it, but I guess
I'm
there's
still learning on that
the
stuff
unseen
too.
Yeah.
Interesting. And for those who are just joining us, this is the Mystic Circle podcast. This is the first hour. If you're if you enjoy this, we still got a while to go for this one, but we will be having a second hour continuing this conversation. The description should be, or the link to join the Mystic Circle is in the description, so you can head over there to watch the second hour. But just continuing on, let me think here. All right, Father, where else do you want this to go? Because I know there's so many different areas. All right, let's go back to Genesis, because whenever he created the heavens and the earth, we have the basic idea. The Bible is, basic instructions. So we're looking at Genesis alone. He just created the heavens and the earth. There's multiple heavens. We, and the basic idea, we have the first heaven, which is the air around us. That's why, like Sion was talking about earlier, whenever, I think it was Sion, forgive me if it was Adam, whenever Jesus was talking about, the kingdom of God is around you, it's within you. Wherever we go, once we actually join the family of God, wherever we go, we are bringing heaven to you, to the world. That was the whole idea that Jesus was trying to give to people, is that you don't have to do something, just believe in me, Jesus saying, of course, and you're good. You'll part, and you're just gonna grow. And it's the whole thing, and I'm trying not to bash the church right now, but like the whole thing right now is, the church says you gotta do all this stuff, you gotta believe, and then you can reach heaven. No, heaven is within you, and you're bringing it wherever you go. So that's one just small aspect of it. Second heaven is more in the skies. I don't know how far out it goes, but with like spiritual warfare, many times that's happening in the second heaven. And the third heaven, which is, this is more, I know with Kabbalist teachings and other deeper teachings, there's probably multiple way out there, but like the third one is commonly in Christendom, the third heaven is where God sits. The Father, or Jesus, sits on his throne. Adam, do you have anything to add to like the first and second heavens? Because those are, of course, they're different dimensions, like we spoke about earlier.
Yeah, and I think when you said the third one was where God rests, that reminded me of the Trinity, right? Mm-hmm. And I think you can kind of base that, was that, whether it be a triangle, you got the Trinity in the triangle form, or you got mm-hmm. the cross, 4 points with the cross, but you got many different interpretations of the Trinity, which can be different layers as well. So if you go into the Christian element, you got the Father, which is one dimension, the Son, which is Christ, second dimension, and then the third one is the Holy Spirit, which is another dimension. And each one helps us in our walk of life. So you choose a dimension on what you want to be. Holy Spirit would be your personal journey. Christ is your mentor and helper. And then the Creator is you're going right to the Creator, be like, hey, what is really going on, and things like that. And, you can even, just like what Sion said, with the energies and frequencies, if, a solid object itself is just matter really moving slow. But when you go into meditation and things like that, with imagination, right? Imagination is, when you're on a spiritual journey, you're using imagination no matter what. And that is the only way that we can even comprehend what we're experiencing, whether aliens or angels, or even talking with Christ or whatever. Our imagination is the only way that we can even understand what these frequency waves are. Because if we just saw colors and little particles and things like that, we couldn't make it out. We couldn't distinguish it. And Josh would be a good example. Looking at the Bible, one of the characters in the Bible was talking about the very same thing, that if I told you what it was like in the other dimensions, you couldn't comprehend you. So that's where these beings are going to show us what makes sense to us, But on the flip side, it's good to know about these energies, these synergies. Just speaking through our mouth is sending frequencies to each of us, changing our timeline and dimensions, because we're opening up a dimension right now, because we're opening up these many different ideas of like, oh, the person that's watching right now, maybe they're very selective, Christian centered. Oh, this person over here, maybe they're more new age, or maybe it's a person that's never even heard about um, a spiritual journey in that way. Like, what are the ethers? What is this matrix you're talking about, right? What's a spiritual journey? you know um Adam, he's talking about Christ, but yeah, he's talking about multi-dimensions. How can that intertwine? It's all of these things that as we're speaking, we're creating and generating different frequencies through the timelines, through the vibrations. And if you ever notice, and I'm just going to bring this up, is that a lot of people now seem to have like a lot of these orbs flying in and out of them, if you ever notice that. And when I see that, I always think of like, oh, these little orbs, maybe they're carrying our frequency and then shooting it back out into the ethers in some way. Like they're just teleporting the energy, be like, oh, Adam has a weird energy, let's send that out there. Oh, Gotham Mystic, he's bringing something different to the table, let's bring that out there. Oh man, Cyan, he's creating some beautiful music, man, we got to send that out to the waves so other people can download those as well, right? Because we're all downloading and sharing these new ideas that we couldn't do 15 years ago, 20 years ago. We're now creating all of these ideas through these. And then if you want to look at it from a scientific thing, like if you want to look into HARP and how they're messing with the dimensions, that's kind of that's kind of like a physical understanding of what capability that we have. Not that we're God, but we are pieces creating something different for this new age, or this upcoming age, because everything that we knew is falling away. The old dimension is falling away. My grandma and grandpa and my mom and dad, what they knew is falling away, and now we're bringing something new and different. And it's my kids, and then the kids that are being born every day, they're bringing in a whole different frequency. And that's what we're doing now, is helping people understand, what is this frequency, what is this energy, why is my kid seeing all these things all over the place, right? They see beings over here, they're talking to souls and things like that. What is this? It's a whole different thing. But again, it's realizing that that there's a thin layer, and if you pay attention, that veil is going to kind of split apart, and you're going to see life in a whole different way. Hopefully that makes sense. I kind of wandered off there, but
I like what you're saying about imagination. Makes me think of the quote from Yeshua, like about how the kingdom of heaven belongs to the little children. And to me, that's a big part of that childlike innocence, is being able to imagine. And when you're at an age before somebody told you that you were wrong, or somebody discounted your imagination, this day and age, that's kind of like, just your imagination is an immediate discount. But whoever said that imagination's not real? And with that, we need that imagination. For me, that's kind of the springboard. Like if I'm in meditation, or having a communing with the divine, like it'll kind of start as something that I conjured up in my imagination, but then it feels like spirit will take that and kind of run with it. But we need that springboard. I think it's hippocampus, some certain part of the brain, like, is responsible for shredding useless information, because otherwise we'd be like constantly aware of how many threads are in the cloth in front of us or whatever. And I wish I was more educated on it, but what I gather is that there's a part of our brain that needs to be able to connect information with something that we already know, whether factual or even in our imagination. And so by using our imagination, by having these discussions, by creating art, by imagining science fiction characters, whatever the case may be. We're creating a certain framework through which we can then experience these different realities. Whereas if we didn't have the imagination, if we didn't have some sort of framework, if we didn't have references to this sort of thing in sacred text, then yeah, maybe it would just be like colors and sparkles and whatever the case may be. Like, it helps us ground it in. And I think that sort of ties into how people can experience the divine, somewhat based on like who they are, and experiencing Christ in the way that they perceive that imagery. Whether you've seen spiritual art or something, their spiritual experience may very well reflect that. Whereas for somebody else, it may look a little bit different. I think that's beautiful. I don't think it in any way discounts it. I think it's really cool to see this infinite divine being kind of tune itself to our own viewpoints in certain ways.
There we go. Computer was not working with me. Yeah, I'm like, come on, work with me here. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where to go from that, because the one thing I'm always kind of thinking on, well, not always, but y'all look at what I'm talking about, is that we serve an infinite God. So we're talking about these little, about the dimensions that we're aware of. But since we serve an infinite God, who's to say there's like an infinite amount of dimensions? And like, what if like the ones that we are aware of, that's just like the start of stuff? Like, like Adam was talking about, how with the past generation, we're seeing that stuff kind of falling away, and we're walking into something new. What if that's a different dimension? What if all these different shiftings and movements that we're seeing is just a different dimension? Because what's our common knowledge on a dimension is basically, how do I even word this? Help me out here, because I don't even know how I'm going to word this correctly. Something that we interact with on a daily basis, but it's invisible. It's something that we knowingly interact with, but it's like the air we breathe. We deal with it, but we don't even realize it. Half the time, like, I want to say like 95% of the people don't even realize that they're interacting with the different things. Heck, whenever you're seeing whenever you're daydreaming, whenever you're seeing a vision, whenever you're dreaming on your bed, you're entering and interacting with a whole different dimension. And then there's the concept of actually being able to see what's going on, whether it's in the future or the current, and the Father's giving you that information, is interacting with you, going through all these different dimensions just to interact with us. The question is, because of our fallen state, how many things are actually lost having to go through all that stuff? And here's another one: sin. Is sin a different dimension? So it raises up so many different questions.
It does. And we also got to realize, that a lot of these ideas are human made, right? Whether it be the Bible or books or comic books or video games or even the ancient texts and artwork that's written on the walls, right? From Egyptian pyramids to just the rocks themselves. What is that? If you do research on some of the ancient ancestors, right, ancient native tribes, a lot of those beings that they experienced, and this is something that I had to just sit down through meditation to kind of get a better understanding, because our mind wanders. It does. Each one of us, our mind wanders. And I think the deeper that we go on our spiritual journey, the more our minds wander because we get curious. We question our belief and faith at times, which is good and healthy. And I think no matter who's watching this, whether you're selective or if you are um, just putting your faith and belief in to the test, it's good to wonder, it's good to question them, and it's good to kind of dig deeper into other spiritual cultures. So when I was looking at these, I think it was the Hopi tribe. I think it was the last one. I was kind of just kind of looking at the artwork on the walls and everything. And a lot of them, natives, they use a deep meditation. They go into a deep trance and they go on a spiritual journey. And a lot of these beings that they meet is through the vision state, is through the meditation state. And it's going to be into the imagination. Like when you're in dreams and visions, what you see in front of you can mean a lot of things. You can see a figure, but each body part or what it's wearing, like say if it's wearing a cloth, that can be a symbolism of something. Say if it has horns, that can be a symbolism of something. One of the Hopi characters, that had like a mouth with really funky looking teeth and just round sticking out eyeballs, right? What does that represent? What does that mean, right? And I think that's where we have to really become more into research mode of like, hey, we can't just distinguish, oh, this being has great powers, because that's what our ancient cultures did. When they seen these beings, they say, hey, I bring this constellation. It's really huge back in the day, even in the Bible, right? I bring this information from Orion and I give this to you. And with the Hopi, I was learning that each of their cities were all placed in the same elements as the Orion constellation area. So everything was mapping together. So as above, so below. And it was this being that told them how to do it. So it really goes into a very interesting dimensional element of like, there's so many beings that are telling us something. And it's not that these beings are fallen angels or things like that, right? If this being is telling you to create these different things to match as above, so below, that's a very creative idea. That's a very creative thing. But the thing that made people fall away from a lack of understanding is that they started to worship that being as a god, because they're like, oh wow, we never even thought about this thing. So they worship that sense of newness to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem with our culture in the past, and that's something that's still plaguing this reality now, is that when we think of something new, this being comes to us, like say it's an ET being or an angel, right? Sometimes you feel like you need to worship it. And something that stuck out in Revelations in the Bible for me was, and I always get confused, you know who it is. Who is it, Peter or John in Revelations?
John.
Or is it John?
Yeah.
Yes. So when John was showing all these revelations, he bent down and he started to worship the angel. And the angel's like, no, you do not worship me. I'm just a messenger. And that's what we need to understand when we're being visited by these beings, is that we don't need to be worshiping them or thinking, whatever they are. Like some people get very confused with even the Christ. I'm not another person, I don't know what people experience, but a lot of times when you're in that Christian faith, Christ is your it. It is your it. So when Christ comes to you and they show you something very interesting, they start to when they come back to the physical reality, start bowing down, say, oh my gosh, Christ showed me this, instead of just evaluating, going, hey, Christ showed me this, let me write this down and see how this makes more sense to me. Like, I don't want to get this in my head, be like, oh my God, Christ talked to me, I gotta go make a YouTube video and share everything out there. But you didn't bother to pay attention, like what kind of clothes was Christ wearing? Did he have a beard? Was his eyes different colors? Did he even speak to you? What was the scenery behind him? Was it a blue sky? Was it a pink sky? Was there green? Was it a ship? You know, you never know, right? There's so many different layers. Just like today, I had some really bizarre dreams, and the last dream I had, and I got to look it up. It was this kiwi, right? The last thing that I saw was a kiwi, and it was cut up really weird looking. I was like, what the heck is this kiwi, right? There was a lot of other weird stuff going on in my dream, but that kiwi just stuck out because that was the last thing I saw in that dream. So for me personally, instead of looking at the chaos of the dream, I got to go, oh, hey, that kiwi really stuck out. Let me go and see what kind of interpretation that meant. And not many people are going to think, oh, they're going to focus on something that was disturbing in the dream, but not a lot of people are going to focus on what the heck was that kiwi? Why was there a kiwi in the dream that looked all weird and funky? So it's really just observing the experience, right? We have a physical experience, we experience life, but the spiritual experience is so foreign, especially into the American audience, that we don't know what we're looking for, right? Even if you're 100% Christian and Jesus is the way and everything like that, and when Christ comes to you, a lot of times we don't know how to interpret what is being presented out there. So I think that's where we really have to look on how we are communicating with our guides, whether it be Christ or a perceived ET being or an angel, something like that. We need to really have some clarification of what's being presented to us as a whole, right? We can bring God into it. And this is something that I've been really trying to figure out how to distinguish between the two, because I really feel that we have more communication with the messengers than with the creator, right? If that makes sense, because we're creating. So we're creating for somebody or more than one being, right? So we're creating, and we really shouldn't be focusing on somebody watching our creation, right? I think we should be aware of what we're creating, but I think we need to be realizing that we have messengers that are guiding us through our creation, that are helping us through. So, our messengers aren't there for to be worshipped, but we need to be communicating with them more. One of the things that I learned in 2010 is that each one of us is born with a guardian. Sometimes we have one, sometimes we have two. Like instantly, like when we're born, we have our guardian just standing there going, oh, hey, I'm your guardian. But we don't know it because we weren't taught. And later on, we begin to, and that's my personal experience, is that we began to identify it through our spiritual journey. Like I've always felt that Christ has been with me since day one, before I knew what Christianity was, before I knew what the Bible was. It wasn't until I went to church, my mom took me to church, that I learned about this Christ character. Reminded me very much of this guide or guardian that's been with me the whole way. So it's very fascinating as a whole, and hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, so many good points.
Mhm.
I love that you said, yeah, just talking about an infinite divine being and trying to relay that. That's it's such a simple, yet for me, like really important fact that it took me a while after being raised in a Christian environment. Um, just that simple concept, like even these extremely sacred, long-standing, beautiful writings, they were like channeled through a human just like you and I. And for me, it was like, oh wait, is that like, am I allowed to remember that? Am I allowed to? But it's incredibly. It doesn't take away from it. I think it's beautiful to remember that it is through the lens of that person and that culture and their personality. And I liked what you were saying about practicing being observant in the trance state and in meditation. It takes a little bit of practice. We can easily have an experience, but we may not choose to focus on certain details. and I love the art form of symbolism. And when I'm working with clients doing like dream interpretation stuff or channeled encouragement, like prophetic type stuff, it's so powerful because the simplest little things, like, all right, let me tune in. Oh, I see like a flower, like whatever. But then you start to unpack the symbolism and what color was it, and before you know it, it's this incredibly meaningful message. So I love that. And conversely, like I think it's definitely a balance, because there's times when I tune in and I'm seeking the divine to kind of download some encouragement for the person I'm working with, and it'll just be like boom, like some imagery, and then okay, what does that mean? And I start to share, and it can be really beautiful and really deep. Other times when it's just me seeking a more like intimate space with the divine, there's times when I'm trying to be observant for symbolism, but there's definitely times when it's more just like a roller coaster ride, and me stopping to try and articulate with my logical mind is actually sometimes taking away from the overall experience, if that makes sense. So I think it can definitely be both, and both are important. But I just find that I'm inhibited from going as deep as the spirit is drawing me if I'm trying to stop and articulate or decipher. But then you can go back and learn a lot from the symbolism.
I definitely agree with what y'all are saying, especially with Adam, where he was talking about like having that vision. And from my studies of dream interpretation, I know that I've only been able to tap into like maybe one or two different levels of not just mine but other people's dreams. I've been able to perceive that there's more to it, but I haven't been able to reach like even further, even deeper. And like like he was saying, you I'm gonna use your example, the Kiwi. It's like you see of all these, you only see the person. It's like God told me this, but that's just one layer. Like what other things was going on in the dream, in the vision? What does the Kiwi mean? What were you doing with the Kiwi? What was Jesus doing? What was going on in the background? What colors? Was there something focused? And all of these different things, all of them are different aspects. They could be considered different dimensions, but whenever you're in that dream, whenever you're in the vision, that alone right there is in a whole different dimension that you're experiencing. And then whenever you come out, and like you're saying, son, you come out and you're trying to remember with your brain, and there's already that who knows how many layers of barrier that you're having to deal with now, because you just experienced stopping, but now instead of it being clear like you're experiencing this podcast right now it's foggy. You can barely remember what happened. That is annoying. And it really makes me. I honestly don't believe that I could be completely wrong on this, but what if that's not how it's supposed to be? Because we know that Adam and Eve, before they fell, they lived in, my guess, in all the different dimensions. But when they fell into what we currently live in, and maybe even more. But how many more layers? And maybe those layers are dimensions. And how many are there that we have to go through? Sion, you were talking about I think it was your Sion having to go through all the multiple things just to access the Father. But then there's that barrier. We're trying to break through it, but we can't. We don't know what it is. And I know for those who are watching who have dealt with those walls in the spirit, and you don't know what to do. You're like, I'm trying to break through. I can feel something on the other side, but I can't break through. What if that's a whole? What if that is another dimension? What if what we call a dimension is something else, and we have no clue what like we're talking about?
That's the assumption.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And if you really think about it, dimensions is a human creation. So maybe there's no dimensions to begin with, right?
Yeah, yeah, good
They're
one.
it just could be, we're just creation. And then we just get these ideas, wherever these ideas come from, to expand in the creation, right? Just like with cyan, people want simplicity. So I think at the end of the day, for those, because I like to talk about many different things, as you guys have already noticed, but very simple. You got the divine, you got creation, and you got destruction. So you get two choices. You can either destroy creation or you can create and allow creation to blossom and grow. And that's really at the end of the day what we're doing, right? But the thing that destroys a lot of our creation is our personal dimension of what we put ourselves through, right? Which, like I said earlier, is the emotional body. That is the number one thing that we have to conquer for anything else, is that emotional state. And maybe that's what this dimension is, this earth plane is learning about that emotional body, right? Because I don't know about you guys, but through my journey, I'm going to be 40 in December. Through that time, it has been in mostly emotions, right? That is what I've experienced, is emotions, and learning on how or who or what can get you through life, right? For me, was learning about God and Christ that has allowed me to have someone to talk to help me get through things, right? I think that's where a lot of the testimonies that come in, whether you are Christian or whether you're on a spiritual journey, right? And if you're like into the new age spiritual journey, it's a little different, but they still have the element. No matter who you talk to, they still have that religious understanding of God and Christ. And I think that's really whatever kind of program that Christ made, right? Whether Christ is fictional or not, from the Bible wise, there was many characters, real life people that have helped us along the way through the generations, that have reminded us about the spiritual journey and that we have to be communicating with the divine, right? I've been really studying the stars a lot, trying to really grasp, understand better, that these stars, there's a lot more to the stars. And it's something you said at the very beginning, I wrote down, talking about, the sons of God, right? S-U-N. Well, you can also look at the sons of God as S-U-N. And then you turn that word son into stars. So the stars of God, right? So when we look up at the stars there, our very soul there's a thing that you can look into. I've done meditation as well. And even our ancient ancestors have said that the stars up there are souls. And our soul could very well be up there. And we could be, if there's a star that sticks out to us or a constellation that we look right at it, we could be looking at our soul, and we're directly looking at the experience that we are perceiving. So when we leave this existence, we're just that star up there, and then we just pass through. It's just something a little different. I've been really playing around with trying to figure out what our ancient ancestors were talking about with the Bible, because like I said, the Bible is rich in history. It's rich in symbolism. It's rich in what happened when the world reset itself. The world has reset itself many times, right? Our last one that we've been told was the flood. And there's a lot of scientific facts and historical documents that have told us about the flood. And I feel that since everything started over, I really do feel that the Bible has a lot of what happened in there. But Christ's story kind of fleshes out the spiritual understanding as well, because just like with scientists, I'm getting off track, I know, but people are focusing so much on what's out there, right? Just like I was talking about the stars. They want to go to the moon so bad. They want to go to Mars so bad, but they're not paying attention to the world that we live in now, right? Antarctica, man, that's so very fascinating to me. There's so many things we don't know about that. The water, going deep, deep underwater. What is underwater? At the deeper we go, what is there? There's still cultures and people, tribes that we're still learning about, that we don't even know exist until we find them later on. And they don't know about any of this. They don't know about the internet. They don't know about nothing, right? They're just living off the land. And if they had any kind of spiritual journey, they're still doing their spiritual understanding through ancestral heritage, right? But at the end of the day, you can make this as simple or as complex as you want to be, right? I'm a complex person. I love to look into the complexities of things. But there's other people who love the very simple things. Be like, hey, I just want to know. I just want to know about the angels. I want to know about Christ and God. That's it. That's all I want to know. The New Age movement, they want to know more about the stars, the star constellations, these ET beings that have come to them through visions and dreams, as well as historically, right? There's so much documentations of all of these different beings that have visited these people, just like I was talking about with the Hopi tribe, right? There's so many things that we don't know. And I think at the end of the day, we should want to know more about it, but we should also realize that there's a very simple way of what a spiritual journey is it's helping you become the best version of you. Conquering the emotional body is so very important. And without that kind of guide or mentor or, something to help you with, right? Because a lot of times people use the religious spirit, which hints, if you haven't checked out the Gothic Mystics book, Legalism, right? Is that what's called?
Yeah.
You can
How
buy it
do
on
I how do I mute
Amazon.com,
myself?
and it really talks about the religious spirit element. People get really caught up in that.
Mm-hmm.
But separate from religion, you can just have a experience with God and Christ and help you through your emotional traumas as well. Because once you conquer the emotions, then you can start focusing on different ways. Like, what is your will and intent in life, right? What are you focusing in there? Like myself, we finally got a new house, and I really had to really focus on the will and intent. Be like, why do I need this house? What is it going to? How's it going to benefit me? How's it going to benefit my family? Things like that. Putting that will and intent out there instead of begging and pleading with God like I used to do in the past. I was putting that will and intent out there. I require this house for this. I require this house for that. Things will fall into place. I require this house. I require this house, right? Just sending that will and intent out there, right? At the end of the day, what you need, you will require over time. But sending that will and intent out helps you stand your ground, instead of pleading, like we were taught back in the day. That was something that really concerned me so very much when I would watch other people, is that they'd be pleading and bargaining with God, right? That's not what God's for. He's not there to plead and bargain with, right? He loves creation, right? He loves creation. So why would he want you to be doing that? And that's what Christ was there to say. Hey, the kingdom of heaven is built within you, so you can find peace within here, right? And the next level is, after you find that peace, is next level of like, hey, you're a creator. What would you like to create now in this environment, right? What role are you going to play in this matrix structure, right? And then so on and so forth.
Yep.
So there's simplicity there,
Mm-hmm.
but you can also combine that complexity if you want to go deeper on your spiritual journey.
All right. If you want to check out and join us for the second hour, be sure to go to themysticcircle.net. The link is in the description. So we look forward